very warm good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome this esteemed panel today, which will deliberate and discuss on the topic letting go, setting boundaries, and managing guilt. The session is sponsored by Titan Company. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers on this panel. Our first speaker on this panel is Mr. Bharat Srinivasarangan, Senior Vice President, Products, M2P Fintech. Bharat heads the product management division at M2P Fintech. He is an MBA graduate from IIM Ahmedabad, is a fintech enthusiast and product management leader with a successful track record of developing and marketing e-commerce and digital products. Prior to M2P, he played significant roles in Best Buy, Wipro, and Tata Teleservices, building products in both the Indian and global markets. A very warm welcome to you, Bharat.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to invite our next speaker on this panel, Ms. Priya M. Pillai, Head HR, Corporate Retail and ISCM for Titan Company Limited. Priya has over 25 years of varied experience with many global brands and has been a part of various corporate roles from scaling FMCG businesses to creating brands to now crafting human capital strategy. Priya has spent a large part of her career in retail and service industry like Titan, Unilever, Mahindra and Mahindra, and managed varied portfolios from sales, operations, e-commerce to heading HR. A very warm welcome to you, Priya.
Thank you so much, and honor and pleasure to be here.
I am now going to introduce our next speaker on this panel, Ms. Sangeeta Parameshwaran, Deputy General Manager, Human Resources, Bluestar. Sangeeta Parameshwaran has traversed a multifaceted journey of over 2 decades across the vital functions of human resources, corporate communications, digital marketing, as well as corporate social responsibility across renowned companies such as Bluestar, Bombay Dyeing, and Kaya Life. She has also worked with NGOs such as CCDT, Anyay Rahit Zindagi, and Akanksha across the cities of Mumbai, Goa, and Kochi in the sector of education, health, and women empowerment. In her current role at Bluestar, she heads HR operations, compensation and benefits, and compliance. Sangeeta holds a master's in medical and psychiatric social work from Tata Institute of Social Sciences with a bachelor's in human development. Happy to welcome you to this panel, Sangeeta.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Anju. Really looking forward to this conversation.
So that's a stellar panel, my dear audience. And we have a very interesting topic at hand today. So very often we have seen women role models acing their career goals by setting boundaries both at work and at home. It looks like it's a natural talent that they have. Might sound simple on the outside, straight and simple, but very often not. What is part of the complexity baggage, and I'm sure each one of you listening to this discussion would agree, is the guilt part of it. So this panel will focus on how women can manage this guilt by setting boundaries, negotiating with the guilt, and by being less self-critical. The session will hand you with practical tools that will enable women to cultivate self-acceptance and move towards a more fulfilling future. With such stellar speakers with varied and very diverse experiences, I'm sure this panel is going to leave us with a lot of takeaways and learnings. I now open the floor for the opening remarks from each one of you. Ms. Priya, may I request you to first share your opening remark on the topic for the day?
Thank you. I think the topic for the day really is something personally, I have gone through it myself and I relate to that entire journey. And when you look at the shifts that organizations are making in this space, after having understood these challenges related to women, in fact, I'm wondering, if I can take rebirth in this phase, because I do see organizations now acknowledging and understanding, which otherwise would have been sitting in a very emotional space, which is about the entire guilt. I'm coming out of this conversation with a network of women that we have in Titan. And in fact, today's conversation was about how when a man is traveling, perhaps, right, and this is again my judgment and hypothesis, they are not asked whether they've taken care of all the house elements. Have you taken care of what needs to be made, in terms of the food, and who's taking care of the home when you're away. But that becomes a very automatic question when a woman is traveling. And in fact, that is a topic that we were discussing today, saying that these are all some of the social biases that we live with, and it's not going to change overnight, right? But what I really enjoy is that now it's come out as a conversation, and that for me is the first step towards the change. And the moment organization make it a conversation topic, I believe that it goes back home. So to give you an example, let's say the ecosystem of Titan has, let's say, about 45,000 employees. If I were to, include off-roll, on-roll, all of them put together. And if 45,000 employees, we bring this awareness, or we bring this conversation topic, I just believe that that's the ripple effect, because 45,000 employees would mean that, they go back to their families, they impact another 4 or 5 people in their families, and that's a cascading effect. So conversation is most important, and I'm so glad that Avtar has actually brought this onto the table for conversation, because once that starts, I think the change, I think the snowball has started. It's now rolling, and a lot of the support system that needs to be built in, whether it's in the organization or in the society or in the home front, I think will begin with this. So that would be my opening remark.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Priya. I think conversations around biases and that creating a ripple effect. Lovely thought there. Thank you for that. May I now request Sangeeta to share her opening remarks?
Sure. So drawing from actually what Priya mentioned, I was thinking that if it was a decade ago, we would have spoken about super women as professionals, and we would have aggrandized the entire thing and lauded in that feeling that, okay, women are perfect in the home space, the workspace, as a daughter, as a mother, as a professional, etc. And we would have lauded and actually been in that limelight, felt good about ourselves. And we have been traditionally hiding that guilt, hiding that feeling of insufficiency. That's how I would say that you feel insufficient. You feel that I have not done justice to the, as a host for the friends who came over last night, or I didn't do enough for my mother-in-law, or I didn't do enough as a daughter, or say for my kids. I wasn't around when, and I think it all stems from the thing that we compare ourselves. We are in a social construct wherein we always strive to be the best, okay, the best superwoman, and that puts on so much of an unnecessary stress. While we have taken on a role reversal in a way in dual career families, many times I think it starts, these conversations also have to be centered around our child rearing. How do we see our sons? Are we making them more sensitive to partake home responsibilities? Because statistics reveal that either at the milestone of marriage or motherhood, it's 50% of women leave the workforce. About, say, 27 of them come back, but 48% of them leave within the next 4 months. So imagine these kind of statistics staring at us. I think there is a long way ahead, but the thing that we have started talking, the thing, and in fact, there's a Malayalam movie on the kitchen, chores that a woman is doing throughout the movie, kitchen sounds that are there. After that, I have heard a lot of Malayali and non-Malayali men talk about the movie and feel a little more sensitive. And there is somebody who said, actually have started helping out with at least making my own tea, okay, in the mornings, which I think is a small step, but it's a sure step towards sensitivity. So that's how I would look at more conversations, more sensitivity, and more acceptance of the thing that you don't need to be perfect, efficient, a superwoman all the time. I would in fact look at superwoman as something which is very undesirable. I'm okay with the thing that I may not be as perfect as my sister-in-law in kitchen duties, who is a homemaker. I would rather, in fact, it's a popular joke in my office space that I often take the easier resort of saying that I'm not as good as you guys to my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law, and take the easy way out and have a platter, to myself when I come home. That's the way I look at it. Thank you.
Lovely,
That's
Sangeeta.
the boundary I set. Yeah, thanks.
Lovely. I think insufficiency and how women beat themselves up about the thought of that, and a great movie reference there. I'm sure we'll have more to touch upon through the course of the discussion. We are very keen to understand your perspective, Bharat, as the diverse team member today on this panel. Over to you, Bharat, for your opening
Yeah,
remarks.
yeah. No, thanks, Anju. And I feel extremely honored and humbled to actually be a part of this conversation. And though we're talking about women and setting their professional boundaries and how they can kind of let go and manage their guilt, and though I wouldn't say that I personally felt that because I'm a man, I do have a wife who actually puts a lot of effort into her career and being a support to her career and helping her enable and take on her path that she wants to be. That's the perspective I relate to this a lot, and that's why I was kind of thrilled when my team brought this up as an opportunity. And even among the few other topics that were there, I actually picked this one, and I really liked this one. So from that perspective, though, we don't, it doesn't have to be a diversity angle, and I hope a lot more men are actually included in this conversation and are able to talk about it and openly express what their concerns are, and so they can understand the perspectives of the women who are actually on the receiving end most of the time, and being able to as Priya said, have that organizational shift that needs to happen, right? It cannot just be a small group that can talk about it and make that happen. So a lot more people need to be involved, a lot more leaders across companies need to be involved and be made responsible in pushing that shift forward. And interesting, Sangeeta, you brought that statistic up about women, say, taking a break in their career at, again, multiple points, whether it's at marriage or at childbirth. And I at least recently at MTV, right, and not as a plug, but even genuinely, this is something that I truly I'm excited and truly care about. Is we run a program called Better Half, where we actually exclusively cater it only for women who are actually on a career break for more than 18 months. So, and I've been on multiple of those, I don't even call them interviews, it's a discussion where people come in and they apply for a job and come in, and they've been so happy and to see the enthusiasm and excitement in their eyes when they say, oh, nobody believed in us, nobody looked at us, gave us a second chance when we are on a break, it's so good that you guys are doing this. It's not even just I don't even want it to be looked at as a charity or like a CSR. It's actually, it makes a lot of economic sense if you do look at it. There is a lot of untapped potential in women who are on a break and want to come back to work, but where the companies are not able to truly see them in a positive way. So there have been close to 10 to 12 people who recently joined us in the last few months in the same program, and they are amazing. The enthusiasm, and we also give them flexible work hours, so it's not like, oh, you need to be here by 9 or 6 or things like that. So they can come in, they can leave at 3 if their kid needs to be home and they need to be with their kid at that time. So I think a lot more, I say men, but leaders across organizations need to be able to take cognizance of the fact that we need more women, more representation, and to be able to add fuel to their success paths and career paths and kind of help them grow. And so I'm here to give that outsider perspective to you, and hopefully that adds a lot of value here as well.
Wonderful, wonderfully put, Bharat. You're a great ally, and I could see the passion that you have for, the overall aspect of diversity when you talked about women on career breaks. I have been part of the statistic myself, so I really understand, what it feels like to be a woman on break, right? So our estimates suggest that there are around 70 lakh active job-seeking women on career breaks in the country across various, domains and industries. So more power to organizations like yours in terms of engagement, with women on breaks. Great. So with that, I would now like to pose to the panel a very interesting question on how women can manage guilt without feeling selfish. I think the root of the feeling of guilt or the emotion of guilt is feeling selfish about it, right? So how can some practical tips in terms of how women can manage the guilt without feeling selfish? Sangeeta, can I request you to go first?
Sure. So I think we are responsible for managing the brand that we carry. So I look at myself a brand of Sangeeta that I am responsible to carry. The more, so when I look at myself as a brand, that I carry, I have to make my choices, okay, set my boundaries, and also make those conscious choices as to when I am doing more of something, I will be doing less of something else. Okay, because I have finite time. That's something that I need to recognize and be comfortable with. Also speak, have those conversations. Having conversations is most important, because there are times I have felt, again bringing back that feeling of being inefficient and not being that good enough, and I would have a conversation that I'm not able to make a sumptuous breakfast in the morning. It's a hurry and scurry in the morning to just put something together. It may be cornflakes, upma, something as simple as that. And I realized when I had a conversation with my husband that his expectation wasn't that. It was a pressure that I was putting on myself. And he said, I think all this, the pride that I have for the professional that you are, the broad horizon that you have because you're working, I think all this, I mean, that is what is most important to me. That sense of pride and satisfaction when I see in your eyes also for yourself. And all these things are secondary. So to have those important conversations, to be able to set boundaries for yourself, that I think would make you less guilty. And I think a large part of these statistics wherein women were compelled to leave or take a break in their careers, I think a lot had to do with how they could have managed their circumstances better if they had spoken about the need for a support system and invest in those support systems. The other day, there was a friend of mine saying that when you keep a help in the house, you have to invest in that relationship also, so that you are able to do more of what you want to do. Okay. And also, studies also say that when men at work, they look for economic incentives, prestige, position. Women look for work situations which are more collaborative, peer support, flexible working conditions. So I think as organizations also have a chat with your manager. We have a program called Break the Bias at Bluestar, and which is also to speak to the managers, break their bias, because so that many times, because we are largely an HVAC and plumbing, firefighting, air conditioning company, and there are a lot of projects that we run, a lot of dealerized network when it comes to our B2C network. So many times what happens is that whether it's a male or a woman manager, what is interesting is we note that we have a lot of unconscious biases, that she will not be able to work at a site, or she would not be able to take in those late evenings which are sometimes required. Don't make it a practice. So those kind of things are being driven in the organization. And we have a 5-star framework, which is select the right potential, support, sponsor, okay, and grow them and salute and recognize their achievements. So that's what Bluestar is doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sangeeta. Again, I think the power of conversation, right? Both at the home front as well as at the organizational front. So breaking the bias, I think, has been a very revolutionary theme that way. And as Priya rightly pointed out earlier, having those conversations is the first step towards change. So with that thought in mind, Priya, may I now request you to share your journey of, in fact, how you kind of managed guilt at various points, and some practical tips for our audience today in terms of guilt management and not feeling selfish about it.
So, completely agree with Sangeeta's perspective on, the starting point being your first have the anchor in yourself, because that's the starting point, right? And a lot about the guilt comes from our social frame of references. That's where it comes from. It's from our families and it's from what we see in the society. And I just want to take a step back here. There is, in fact, very similar, Sangeeta, the program, and we also call it Breaking the Bias, but the nuance of the program is very different. What we did is, and in fact, this was from our erstwhile managing director, Bhaskar, who would say that, listen, we don't have enough women in, let's say, in some of our parts of the organizations. We need more, which is, let's say, either in the engineering or in the supply chain. While marketing, typically your marketing, people function, HR, you would have them, right? And the moment you look at organizations looking at the entire DI agenda, that's where it gets filled up immediately. Some of these, because also the supply is also perhaps there from the market perspective. What we did is we actually studied, in these roles when it comes to supply chain. So let's say our community in Hosur or in even Pantnagar, we actually did a very focused drive of getting more women. So in Pantnagar, 90% of our factory are of women. In our Hosur also, we have a large percentage of women. But I must also accept that these are still at the entry stages, and we still need to make up progress, because the true DI is when you look at the percentage of women in the top level, right? That's really for me when the needle moves. So this whole bit about the guilt, right? And it came up in our understanding that the leakage really happens from you are bringing people at the entry, but it's in the middle segments that you have the leakage, you lose them, right? And I think Sangeeta also touched upon how people are taking off then in terms of, I think people are, okay, obviously biologically woman has to deliver, so there is no shying away from that, right? But what I'm seeing also is that a lot of our social frameworks itself can perhaps be worked upon. And what I mean by this is that when we understood that we need to get more and more women, we actually went to the institutes. And when we went to the institutes to do sessions, we did the sessions with, so you would see that even in engineering colleges, and this is a very interesting data, and please indulge me for a moment, from the intake to the final year and to the pass out, also you will see this drain happening, this leakage happening. Right. So, and we said that it is not about addressing the girls in the colleges or the women in the colleges. It was actually about addressing their families, right? And giving them the confidence that they can and they should support the children in their family, the girls in their family, to take on jobs. And therefore, we also institutionalized a practice saying, so we first try to understand why is it that this leakage is happening, because there is this fear, one, that even when I'm sending my daughter to the college, and this may not be in the top 8 or 10 cities, I'm talking more about the tier 2, tier 3, where this happens a lot more. When we went and we saw that they say there is reluctance in sending them, but even if they are sent, then there is fear that they would get married to somebody in the college. Or there is even fear that if they were to take on a job, they would become independent. In fact, independent woman was not looked at positively in some of these places that we went. And we did these sessions in the institutes called Breaking the Barriers. And we actually did, we took women who are from our different, where you break the ceiling, where you are actually giving them roles where women conventionally they would not have seen. So in supply chain, in production lines, let's say even in the digital, or even in our sales roles, where typically they're not used to seeing women. We would bring those women onto those sessions and have them talk, and we would also encourage the students to bring their parents, right? And I must tell you, it was very heartwarming, Anju, and this is obviously pre-COVID, that a lot of the students would want one-on-one sessions with us. So when they would, let's say, even look at us standing there and talking, they would really feel that, hey, listen, this is a possibility. We want to know more about it. And most of the time they would talk about is, can you convince my parents? Right. And so what we did is we actually created a little program saying, why don't you come and do internships with us for a few months in the final year or in the fourth year? And also so I think one of the advantages, obviously Tata and Titan has a certain trust and equity, and they also a safety standard, right? Your child is safe in the organization. And I think we leveraged that, and we told them, okay, we would take care of them. You send them for the 2 months and 3 months and see how it is. And what also happens is that in the 2-3 months, when the girl is doing the internship and she's getting it's not very high, but still getting a little bit of economical independence, she is experiencing that. She's getting a taste of that. And at the same time, when the family is seeing that, hey, listen, this is not what I thought of, it is safe. And there is also equity, and there is, like Sangeeta said, I'm the brand. She's also becoming a brand by herself by going into a job. I think these are some things we need to start building in the society. We have to change the frame of reference. That's when guilt will shift. Because the guilt comes from where? Because, you have your parents, your in-laws, the society or your neighbor saying, oh, I keep seeing you travel every week. They may not ask the husband. They may tell that to the wife, oh, you travel a lot. So what happens to the child? like I was saying earlier, right? So these are all the frame of references. But the frame of reference, and we can wait for the society to change by itself, or I believe organizations have the power to initiate the change because they are large. Organizations by itself can create that difference. And I just want to give another example. We've been doing this part of our non-conscious bias sessions. In fact, something that even Avtar had helped us with. We've also started doing this privilege walk. Yeah, and in fact, Soundarya had shared this thing about the privilege walk with us. It's such a powerful tool, right? And if it's like Sangeeta, Bharat, and I'm standing, right, and a question is asked, let's say, hey, listen, how many of you, don't have to worry when you go back home about what is on the table, right? And typically you would find, right, and no biases here, but in most cases, the men are taking that step forward, right? And when we conducted these privilege walks across the organization, what we came across was that at the end of it, the men were saying, I have newfound respect for my wife, right? For my spouse or for my mother, or, whoever they were staying with. They were saying, because we understand that, there are so many things we take for granted. But my lady colleague doesn't have that privilege because yes, she needs to worry about this. So that's also coming out of this whole bit on guilt. So if you are able to change that frame of reference for people, I think those shifts can come in. I don't know if there is a ready-made tool, but I would go back to what Sangeeta said. First is you take charge of having that conversation, and an adult-like conversation. It's not coming from rebellious, and I want to bring that difference. I think there are enough people willing to support us. It's just that we need to reach out. Like Bharat was saying, I think it is not about men or women, right? At the end of the day, because there would also be things that a man is going through and we've seen those biases as well. But are you ready to have that conversation? And I do believe that in the society that we live in, we have to build some support system. Support system should come from and I know it's a little taboo in our country still, but I do believe the kind of counseling support you give, which should be free of cost for these people, and that's where organizations should take that and socialize it. Managers play a big role. I also don't understand, when sometimes organizations say that women managers should help women. I think even men can equally help because I think the allies come from there. So any manager, irrespective of the gender, should support women in the journey. In fact, I've had the other end of the guilt. Let me give you the reverse. There are times when single men or single women come to me and tell me that, because I'm single, I'm told, Acha, you take this additional role because your colleague is just delivered or your colleague is pregnant. And so, why are you taking for granted that I don't have a life, right? So there are so many biases that exist. But to come back to your point, I would say that, one is recognize that you need support, right? That you don't need to be a Superman, Superwoman. And the fact that, asking for support does not mean you're weak. Asking for support means that you are stronger and that there are people willing to help you and support you. I think those are the two things I would say would be the quick tool. From a quick tool perspective, that's all I can think of, Anju. Sorry if I gave you a long answer for that.
No, Priya, I absolutely loved how you, you traced the entire arc right from when girls probably start college and the whole drop off thing that you talked about, right? So very interesting manifestations of breaking the barriers and biases. Loving the conversation here. I now move over to Bharat on his take on how guilt and selfishness can, be kind of separated and women needn't feel guilty. Over to you, Bharat.
Sure. Thanks, Anju. So from a tactics perspective, I was kind of mainly categorizing things into three buckets, right? Like one is, as Priya initially said, self. It needs to come from self. I think women need to stop feeling guilty about not having to, say, go home at 5 p.m, or even if it's dinner, even if you have a cook, even if it's a few days you don't spend enough time in the evening with the kids, whatever it is. I think you need to make peace with the compromises you're making by spending more time at work. So it definitely needs to start from within. Second, looking at organization, your organization, your whether it's your manager, and I wouldn't even say the manager, the leadership, it needs to start from the leadership in being an example, showing what it takes, and letting that organization have that open culture of having, whether it's women, men, whoever it is, right? Like doing things at their own pace, making sure they are still accountable for the things at the end of the day. So unless that support is there, we can, all the realization from the self can still be curtailed if the company doesn't support it in what you can practically end up doing. The third part, which the social part, right? And both of Sangeeta and Priya kind of touched about it. The family, I wouldn't even say society, I would still restrict it just to the immediate family, because they are the ones who are probably on the other side waiting at home. So just a quick snippet I want to share. So in my previous job, I had like zero travel. So I was mostly, or the outside of the daily commute to work, I didn't travel much outside, but my wife used to occasionally travel out, right? But that was still okay. And even if it was for a couple of days or for a week, for a conference, whatever it is, we made sure that was not something that was taboo, or it was perfectly okay for her to do that, because she has again her own career aspirations that I need to be able to support. And that's something that out of a relationship that we've kind of come to grow about and complement with each other. And so I learned to cook a little by myself, take care of the kids myself, take care of the household, things like that. So we made sure we knew what we were signing up for. And though I'm not saying that everybody can exactly be that way, but it's the first step is to actually be able to talk to your partner and say, this is what I want to be able to do, right? And come to an agreement that if that occasional travel, if the occasional late evening at work, if the occasional weekend work comes by, I need you to be able to hold the ship and keep moving forward, right? And not make it a big deal, or not make it as a I owe you one, and okay, I need to be out in a different weekend since you were out that evening, things like that. So we need to make it less transactional and more about we're both marching towards the same goal. So that agreement as a family, I think, is extremely critical. What the good byproduct of that is, my kids, for example, they for them it's extremely normal for me to be at home while my wife is away, right? So that's something that we need to be able to foster, so that at least next, if not the first, like second, third generations, they don't think that it's any different, that it's only the women who need to be taking care of the household, while the men can be late at work and can come in whenever they want. So those are my tactics from how I think women can in fact manage this effectively.
Wonderful, Bharat. I think changing frame of reference, which Priya referred to. So you gave us a template there. Of course, varies from family to family and individual to individual, but great sharing there. Also, the 3 buckets that you talked about, right? That's a solid framework out there for all organizations to look at in terms of how that can be influenced. So before I get back to the other speakers, I would like you to take my next question as well, Bharat, which is basically around men and your experience of are men actually better and more forthcoming in terms of setting boundaries and saying no's, right? So would love to hear from you on that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's largely the perception, and mostly true as well, that men are more assertive at work and can go up to my manager or boss and say, yes, I need to leave early, or take a couple of days off, than a female employee being able to do the same. I think there is still a lot of hesitation, a lot of internal chaos that the woman goes through before she's even taking the first step towards going and having this conversation, say, with her manager, right? So from that point of view, yes, it makes it a little bit easier systemically for the male employee to go and set that boundary. But at the same time, the counterpoint I was thinking was, it also makes it a little difficult. So if at least in companies where they're not seen as equals yet. So, or if even due to the, say, social bias that, say, most of us still carry, if I go walk up to my manager and say, oh, I need to leave at 3 because I need to play daddy duty and there's nobody to take care of my kids, they'll really go, why is your wife not at home, right? That might, they might face more friction in being able to, though they might easily take the first step, they might face more friction in actually making it a reality than a woman. So again, back to my previous point, I think leaders at all levels, whether you're a manager managing a team or managing a whole company or a business unit, whatever it is, I think they need to normalize this and not differentiate between, say, a man versus woman asking this necessarily, but that it should be okay for anybody to set a good boundary, and still it should be more, hey, did that effectively affect my work outcome versus not, should actually be the rubric that they should be looking at, right? So to that effect, I just want to provide one example from my last job. So my kids had a yearly departure in the last school that they were in, and so I had to be home every day at 3:50, and that was when both me and my wife were in the same office. And since at that time she was a contractor, I actually took the liberty of going to talk to my manager and saying I need to leave at 3:20 every day, all 5 days a week, because I need to go pick up my kids and take them home. And for the, again, the reputation I had, for the relationship I shared with my manager, he agreed to it, and we still did that for a good 6-7 months. And interestingly enough, that's the same year I got promoted. So it was less about me, but I actually was very proud of how the company kind of treated the whole situation. The space that my manager, my leaders, my VP gave me back then to be able to do that. And I'm sure at least over there, they wouldn't have differentiated between me versus a female colleague going, say, with them with the same request. But I think that's the culture I think we want to be able to emulate across companies, right? Like, don't look at what time somebody comes in or what time somebody leaves, but being able to see things objectively and making sure and treating all of us as responsible professionals, right? Like that if we do sign up for something, that we should take it to closure. So that's my 2
That's
cents.
a very important and interesting perspective, Bharat. The fact that people can take ownership and, the boundaries can emerge from there. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, as a society, even culturally, right, we are attuned to not saying many no's. So probably there isn't much of a gender difference there. Yes, there is additional pressure and stress that women undergo, but the boundaries part of it is probably the solutions are gender agnostic. Priya, may I now request your thoughts and your experiences on the same?
In fact, thanks, Bharat, for bringing that perspective. It really brings alive, basis some of these insights. We, in fact, also looked at, policies being gender agnostic. Right. So just to give an example, the policy on travel, which we very recently modified, where we said that, if you have a child, a very young child, and who cannot be left at home alone, please, you can take support along with you and the child, and the company would bear the cost. And the reality is that we need not do this only for the mothers, right? Because now the roles are also getting, those roles are in a way getting blurred, because we move from a joint family to a nuclear family system, and therefore it hit me a chord when you were talking about that, Bharat, because like for you to go back home, it's setting that example, saying that those roles and responsibilities are equal. And therefore, there are certain which is biological need, and those remain where they are. And but there are many others which I think even the fathers are now asking us. And I must tell you, actually, I had fathers asking us, okay, you've given us this 2-week paternity leave, but we want a larger paternity leave as well. So, but just coming back to the point you're making, and I would say that contracting, basically setting boundaries is contracting, right? It's about, and it is a skill. And it requires, I would say, it requires training, and it requires people to know how to contract. Because the moment, the greatest difficulty people face is the moment you need to bring that adult of yours into activation, and then you need to contract. And that's what is boundaries. That gives birth through the legal function, right? That's what they do. They bring in those contractual agreements. But I'm not saying you need to be legally worded in the way you contract, but that's about setting expectations, and at the same time agreeing to saying, hey, listen, I can go this much, and I'm getting that support. And I like what Bharat said, which is about, it's not about the gender, it's about how is it impacting what I'm doing, how is it impacting my deliverables. And if you were to apply that lens, then it is gender agnostic. It has nothing to do with that. And I think one good thing that's happened with also I mean, one can argue about it, but I think in the 2.5 years of seeing that a lot of work which we believed can never be done, work from home, but now are, and I'm seeing that men and women are now also wanting to take on a lot more responsibility and say there are men who are coming and telling us I like to work from home because my wife has an important meeting, right? And I know of young couples who actually started doing that. You know what Bharat is saying, which is that contracting. They have started setting those boundaries, saying that okay, this is, and in fact I do it at home. I've already told my husband these are dates I'm traveling. We also so I like, so he says okay, I'll be at home during those dates, and therefore I think those conversations in some places are happening seamlessly. I don't think every part of the society and every part of the organization is the same, and that's what I would call privilege. I think some of us are privileged to do that, and I think some others are not. How can we enable that? I would say that if out of the 45,000 employees or the people who are in the Titan ecosystem, if we are able to influence 10, 15, 20, 30% of them into doing these boundary setting at workplace first, I think they'll be able to do it at home as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Priya, for that. Sangeeta, over to you on how you feel men are different or not different in terms of setting boundaries.
Sure. Traditionally, yes, there is a difference, but I think it's more to do with personalities. It's about being kind to yourself that comes first. And it is the entire the thing is, one is, do I want to make a difference in my family? That is something that those kind of conversations have to start at home, whether with your own children, with your sons, with your daughters. So that kind of conversations, I'm sure couples are approaching that together, and with their children, because they want a more sensitive generation tomorrow, and the younger generation today is much more committed to themselves to have a gender agnostic environment actually. And as families, I think we need to contribute. Another thing is, I think also to men, we need to be kind-hearted, because many times the primary burden or responsibility of earning for the family falls on the man. Sometimes I think to myself, how fair is that? That I can think of the thing that I can take a break, while my husband can't take a break. I think there I need to step up and show some, to show some kind of equality in that sense. So I think it works both ways. And while in certain pockets, as Priya mentioned, that not many women, not all women may be privileged, and not very privileged families to have that kind of understanding, we can start a ripple effect. That is like the privilege walk Priya mentioned about. When I hear of a colleague supporting at home, let me reinforce that by appreciating that in a group. Those kind of, and to start that ripple effect, those are the things I think that we should start thinking about, and also build our personalities to plan. I think it is about 3 P's: plan, pursue it, and persuade others to follow that. That's the way I would look at it.
Beautiful. So that's another wonderful set of 3 P's that you handed us over, Sangeeta. Thank you so much for that. I think we have a few minutes left, but quickly I would like to go around the table. If there are 2 things that you want the audience to remember in terms of negotiating with their guilt, right? What are those two key takeaways that you would want to give the audience? Anyone? Sangeeta, can I request you to go first?
Sure. Yes. So yes, I think those 3 P's, it really helped my life. And I was just thinking, summarizing, I think I would like to summarize that: plan through how you want to, and there will never be, and accept that there will never be an always straight balance. It will always have its ups and downs, and enjoy the roller coaster, as it goes around. So plan, persuade the people around you how you need to contract, and pursue it religiously with the people you have at home, with your family, with your colleagues, and think that you uphold this thing of women to have equal opportunities. Keep that always on the radar and find opportunities to table that, is the way I would look at it.
Great. Priya, what are the 2 key takeaways that you would want our audience to remember?
So I'm going to draw an analogy here, and Anju, it's first one is the analogy I would draw is, if you're in the airline, right? If you're in the aircraft, what the air hostess tells you is that before you put the oxygen mask on somebody who is either dependent on you, you need to first put it on yourself, right? You have to take care of yourself, then you can take care of somebody else. So if the guilt is coming from that, I need to take care of people, you need to first take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself would mean setting those boundaries for yourself, because when you set boundaries, that's how you demonstrate that care. And I would also say that there is this, I think this phrase that as we have grown up, we would have heard it, but I don't think we paid so much attention to. But I think ask and you shall receive is a very important one. The reality is that when you ask, I believe that somewhere the universe also conspires to find that support for yourself. So have the confidence, and you don't need to really burden yourself with that guilt. Remember that it is only about asking, and you will be able to get that support.
Great, Priya. Over to you, Bharat. 2 quick takeaways.
Sure. So the first takeaway is for all the women listening to this, watching this, make your understand and write down your priorities and make peace with it. Don't feel guilty for prioritizing work over home or the other way around. Everybody is different, and make sure you are very clear in what you want to achieve, and speak up about it to your manager in your organization and with your, say, partner in your family. The second one is for all the leaders who are watching this, try to cultivate and emulate a culture where organizations are more open and are able to accommodate these from women, from even men as well in some cases, but more so for women, to make sure they feel more empowered to be able to take those and boundaries and set their own boundaries, and so that they don't feel guilty at the end of the day.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Very interesting call to actions that all our panelists have shared with us. It was a very, very interesting, informative, and engaging discussion. I have made my own notes in terms of mental notes, in terms of what I can take away. Hope all the participants enjoyed the discussion as well. Once again, thank you very much on behalf of Avtar. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Sangeeta. And thank you, Bharat, for joining us today. Thank you, audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.